Good morning, and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with Father Orsi. I'm BC Cloutier, and this is Father Michael Orsi. Nice to see you, Father.
Always good to see you, my man.
You're looking like a brand new $100 bill.
They're not worth that much anymore. You've heard of inflation, folks. I mean, there's a time, BC, when you say $100. Wow, it's a lot of money.
Right.
You know what? It's not a lot of money if you go shopping and you buy a loaf of bread, a quart of milk, and some Twinkies. I mean, it's gone.
You're right.
The Twinkies have gone up.
Well, the good news is you can buy Twinkies and they last for 30 years. So, buy them today, and as the price goes up, never mind. I wanted to talk, Father, this morning a little bit, or maybe more than a little bit, about abortion. Mm-hmm. Certainly a very, very divisive issue in this country. Recently, Vice President Kamala Harris condemned the Supreme Court conservative justices for creating what she said is a health care crisis in America. Now, Vice President Harris is often shrill, but
what do you mean by that?
To call abortion health care is just another egregious lie coming out of the Biden administration. Yeah. It's an outrage.
It is. We talked on an earlier program, folks, about how the narrative keeps changing. We don't have an honest rendition of history. We've kind of lost that. We talk about what's going on in our schools, what our children are learning, but also how language is being misused. And the late, great Pope John Paul II wrote a magnificent letter. It was called Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life. And this was an apostolic exhortation, it's called. And he talked about how people use euphemisms. And a euphemism means that you use a certain term which, in effect, changes the true meaning of what is actually happening and what is actually going on. So let me give you an example. In the past, people would say that they are pro-abortion. But that had kind of a negative connotation. Pro-abortion means, I like abortion. If anybody likes abortion, and there are some these days that claim it's a wonderful thing, it's inconceivable. Anybody could think that. But they changed the name. So groups like Planned Parenthood pay organizations to find words that will resonate in a positive way to get their message across. So it becomes from pro-abortion to pro-choice. And everybody says, I like choices. Yeah, right. We all like choices. I mean, you get ice cream. I like vanilla, I like chocolate, I like pistachio, and all different varieties of ice cream. And that's, in people's minds, that's choice, and choice is good. And we like to have choices, so you change the word. Now I am pro-choice. Same thing here with the vice president. To say that, abortion is health care. Well, folks, let me tell you something. Right off the bat, it ain't health care for the baby that's being aborted. It's just
death care.
It's death care. More than that, abortion is not always a very safe procedure. There are times when the abortionist messes up, all right, and women die from abortions. Also, there is to take into consideration the psychological effect that abortion has on a woman. And sometimes, oftentimes, I should say, I'm hearing more and more about the effect that it has on the man, that the child that he fathered has been aborted. So to call it health care is a euphemism. It is also a lie. But what it tries to do then is to get more government money funneled to abortion clinics and to help states that have abortion, unfortunately, up until birth, and some places want to do it after birth. It's a way of getting more funding into those abortion states and to abortion clinics. So you make it sound good, and then some people will say, well, it's health care. It belongs in Medicare. It belongs in insurance plans, health insurance plans. And that's what she is trying to do there, to change the perception in people's minds.
Well, and I think that's the challenge of, let me back up. I think it's fair to say that the that the Roe v. Wade decision was favored by a minority.
Yes.
So when we see these top line numbers, we see that somewhere around 60% of the population says, well, abortion should be okay. Now, when you drill down, there are some real caveats there. Abortion up to 6 weeks, up to 12, whatever. Outright abortion, the people that support outright abortion are really, really, really a minority. Yet, again, top line, people think that Roe v. Wade should not have been struck down. So the challenge is to, I think, change hearts and minds. And that is a tall order, even taller these days, because more than half of all abortions occurring today are chemically induced.
Right.
Which, by the way, is a huge danger, perhaps more than being in a clinic.
Right.
And Planned Parenthood and that ilk is doing a very good job of suppressing the stories of women who are in real medical trauma as a result of the abortion pill.
Yeah. When we talk about abortion, a lot of people don't see it as a moral issue, and some of them don't even see it as a ethical or biological issue. Okay. What the pro-abortion lobby has done was to place in people's minds the idea of it is a right. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's a right for me to do whatever I want to do with my body. And that's what a lot of women are hearing. And so when you hear people saying that they would like women to have that choice, it's based on their right, and they're not thinking any more deeply about the fact that there's something called a moral evil. And we've lost a sense of evil. You know, it's right, it's wrong, and it was something we used to call repulsion. I am repulsed by this. Most people can't think that deeply, and therefore it's all about me and what I want to do with my body, but little consideration is given to the fetus, the child that is in the womb. In other words, that child has no rights. And unfortunately, this whole idea of rights has gone so far. We see it in the transgender movement. I have a right to change my body, to take off my male parts and have somebody make them female parts, and or add an appendage where there is no appendage. But it's my right to do what I want with my body. And BC, you know this as well as I do. It's come down to even suicide. I have the right to take my own life. That's right. Is it, morally right? Well, they don't go that far. It's just my right to do what I want to do.
Well, there's another myth that Planned Parenthood has perpetuated, and that is that a fetus is a clump of cells.
Right.
Now, scientifically, we know that is not true. And if we could pass one piece of legislation, in my mind, the legislation would be a woman must see a sonogram before making the decision. We'll be back right after this.
As you can imagine, producing this wonderful program, Action for Life, it costs a great deal of money. We're going to need your help. So if you would like to donate to keep this good news program on the air, please go to your computer, your cell phone, actionforlife.net.
Welcome back to A Conversation with Father Orsi. I'm B.C. Cloutier. Father, if I may, let me just read a little bit from the book of Psalms, chapter 6. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. I'm tempted to say that psalm was written for the Biden administration.
Oh my God. And we're not, folks, old Father O is not political. I want you to know that right now.
But when I read that psalm, which I just happened upon when I was doing something else, it applies to what we're talking about here. Somehow we have to change hearts and minds, that it's the moral issue that is missing from the equation.
Yeah.
And I think a sonogram would be one way that perhaps would give women pause, a bit of pause at least. I realize there are some women that are just determined they're going to do what they're going to do. But those women, to my way of thinking, are using abortion as contraception.
Right.
And that's another real problem with abortion.
Right. Yeah, this is an important thing we're talking about right now. How do you change minds and hearts? And as BC said, the sonogram is a fantastic tool. They also call it ultrasound. And in many states, the abortion clinic has to at least offer the person, the woman, that she could take a sonogram and she could see. She doesn't have to look at it, but that's another part of it. You take it, and then if you want to see it, then they have an obligation to show it to you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, from my experience, many women who have looked at the sonogram change their minds.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let me tell you a great story. Number of years ago, not too many years ago, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, we were outside of Planned Parenthood in Naples, Florida. And a truck was going in, a pickup truck, a man and what we presumed was his wife or girlfriend. And we try to stop the truck. We have sidewalk counselors there, and the sidewalk counselors asked him to roll down his window. And a lot of times they just drive through, but he did, he rolled down his window, and they gave him some information. He was Hispanic, I think from a Mexican descent, and we have it in Spanish and in English, and they told him to make sure that they get a sonogram. So Planned Parenthood had to give them a sonogram and to look at it. They don't have to look at it, okay? So they decide they're going to drive in anyway, although we tried to dissuade them and send them to Community Pregnancy Center, which gives the sonogram and gives them any kind of help they may need to bring the child to term. Well, anyway, they went in and we thought we lost them. Anyway, they went in, and they came out within about a half hour, and they demanded to see the sonogram. And they had the picture of the baby in utero. And he came out with a big smile on his face. Me papa, me papa. And
saved a baby.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, a sonogram is one way to do it. Are there other ways to do it? Well, the other ways begin in the home. How children are educated by their parents as to what is right and to what is wrong. Of course, you have to remember these days, just like we've talked about earlier and in previous programs, about how there is a certain narrative, how truth is being presented. It's oftentimes lies. And some will say, well, science says that it's nothing but a clump of cells, or it's not alive until there is a heartbeat, or we confer personhood on the child when the child is born. So it goes the whole gamut. But you see, science has also been fooled around with. And although we might think we have all the facts of science, the question then becomes, who's science?
Right.
And we've had that experience with Dr. Fauci. Folks, you remember Dr. Fauci? And
follow the science.
I am the science. I am the science. So, we can see where that led us. We had this debacle of the COVID crisis, which caused a tremendous amount of harm to society, to young people, to married life, to religious life. And yet somebody was proclaiming to be a scientist, a scientist. Science does not have all the answers. It is a tool that we should use, but it's our own humanity, it's our own interaction with other people, family members, community, that ultimately begins to change the minds and hearts of other people. So, folks, you might not be a scientist, but you are a witness to what is right and to what is wrong.
By the way, there are people watching this broadcast that are undoubtedly saying, a couple of old white guys, what do they know? I want to make a point, if I may, Father, and that is that this show is sponsored by Action for Life. Mm-hmm. Action for Life is a pro-life organization, and we have made a commitment. If a woman chooses to carry her child to birth and feels as though she cannot rear that child, Action for Life will pay all of the expenses related to an adoption. That's how serious we are about this issue.
And tell the folks about what we're doing with Sunlight Home, how we're going to support their program of helping unwed mothers.
Well, exactly. Sunlight Home is a maternity home where mothers can go, have a child, and continue, provided they are participating in educational programs, right, financial management programs, etc. And Action for Life is a significant supporter of Sunlight Home, as we are many other pro-life organizations. So we are dead serious about what we're doing and what we're talking about here today.
You got to put folks, you got to put your money where your mouth is. Action for Life, we're putting our money where our mouth is. And speaking of money, we could use some of yours too.
Good pitch, Father. On that note, we'll be back right after this. Hi, I'm BC Cloutier. Perhaps you're not able to watch A Conversation with Father Orsi weekly in this time slot. If not, I've got some great news for you. You can visit actionforlife.org and click on A Conversation with Father Orsi. Each one of these episodes is on the website. Again, actionforlife.org, and click on A Conversation with Father Orsi. Thank you, and God bless.
Hey, gang. I know a lot of you sometimes can't watch all of our episodes of Action for Life. However, we have a solution for that. All you have to do is go to YouTube and search for Action for Life Florida. And you can catch up on all the shows, and guess what? Extra added bonus, you get to hear my weekly homily. So, YouTube and you make a fine couple.
Welcome back to A Conversation with Father Orsi. I'm BC Cloutier. Father, as Catholics, we are opposed to abortion, right, because that's what the Bible teaches us. There are certain Christian sects who find abortion, dare I say, acceptable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's just talk about that. From the earliest times, people recognized that the Bible talked about life. The whole Bible is really about life. And there didn't have to be any kind of a specific instruction regarding abortion. It was something that was just not there because it wasn't a question. However, some early documents, for instance, the letter of Barnabas, specifically, it's about the year 150, specifically says this to the Christian community that abortion is forbidden.
Really?
Oh, yes, that early.
Wow.
We also have the document called the Didache, written around the year 150, specifically states abortion is not permissible. So the very early testimonies when these issues came up, especially because of the Roman Empire, the Romans allowed abortions. Right? So as the church grows in the Roman Empire, then the church makes the statement, this is not permissible, because before that, it wasn't a question, just you didn't do that. And so when we look at the scriptures, both the Old and New Testament, what we do find is this ethic of life. And from the womb I knew you. I chose you before you were born, you know. Mm-hmm. Can a mother forget her child? I could not forget you. So you have all of these indications of, you know, life being precious in the womb and something that cannot be snuffed out, right? Now, this has been the constant Christian tradition. As a matter of fact, let me just say it's the Jewish, Orthodox Jewish tradition too. It goes way back. I mean, we could point to somebody like the great Rabbi Maimonides, 13th century. Maimonides said abortion is not permissible. He said it's not permissible. He gave one little window and he talked, basically, it sounded like he was talking about an ectopic pregnancy, which really wasn't an abortion. It wasn't an attempt to kill the child, an attempt to save the mother's life. But Maimonides said no. He had a little section there that some rabbis debate, but it was never part of Orthodox Judaism either, never allowed. So too, when we go to the Protestant Reformation, Luther found it abhorrent and Calvin found it abhorrent. So some of the churches that have, you know, gone the liberal route, if I may, you know, saying that it's okay, they're not in the best tradition of the church, whether it's the church from apostolic times or from the Reformation times or from the synagogue. So there's no room in there for them to say, well, there's been a change in Christian understanding of abortion. There hasn't until people decided that they were going to change it on their own. And that's what's basically happened. So abortion has never been permitted. And all of a sudden, I guess, as time went by, people began to say, well, the heck with the Bible, the heck with the Christian tradition. We'll do whatever we want.
And the feeling that it's no big deal.
Right.
It is a big deal.
It's a big deal. Yeah, it's a big deal. I think that a lot of people do not know their theology, number one. They do not know science, number two. And number three, people have lost a sense of right and wrong. And we see that in so many ways where people are just willing to cut corners to make life easier for them, what they perceive to be easier. And in the meantime, as that happens, we begin to have an erosion of the moral fabric of our society. And that's where we are today. We have a moral breakdown in America. 50% of Americans now say we're in moral decline.
Right. Well, and you know what? That alone is a subject for another episode.
It really is. It really is.
We'll be back right after this.
Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a society today that talks an awful lot about being woke. And unfortunately, some of our churches are falling into that trap too, that they want to be woke. In other words, they want to get on the current wave, what's happening in our culture. They want to be with it. And in doing so, they are selling their birthright for a bowl of porridge. What do I mean by being woke? Sometimes churches have said, we are now welcoming communities. And that means basically, hey, anything goes here. I'm okay, you're okay, come on in. No, the churches must challenge us using the gospel as our guide as to what is good and what is right for human beings. So if you go to a church that's woke, I would suggest that you get woke and get out, because that church is not doing you or your family any good.
We're back with a conversation with Father Orsi. I'm BC Cloutier. Father, final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I have thought about this abortion issue for a long time, and certainly it is a crucial issue that deals with life and death. And why is it such a contentious issue today? We talked about people saying I have a right to do what I want with my own body, and that's an important part of the cultural conundrum that we find ourselves in today. But also, it's more than that. It's a wedge issue. What do I mean by that? Once you allow for abortion, as I said earlier, it contradicts Scripture. It contradicts science. It contradicts the whole history of civilization, which says that this abortion is something that's detrimental to society. Why? If I could determine who lives and who dies in abortion, what happens as we move along the continuum of life? And naturally what happens then is that other people then can begin and do make decisions for other people. In other words, that baby might be deemed to be unwanted or superfluous. What about the person with certain defects, mental defects, physical defects? Could that person be deemed superfluous to society? And what about older people? Could they be deemed superfluous to society? We don't need them anymore. Why can't we just get rid of them or convince them to end their own lives? And that's happening more and more. It's happening to a great extent in Canada today. And you know what happens in Canada? That what do they call that? Alberta Clipper. It comes down. And then it hits the United States, and we're the next ones to catch a cold. And sometimes a cold could turn into pneumonia. And I think we're on the verge of pneumonia at the moment because respect for human life has greatly decreased in our own country. So when we talk about abortion, it's the whole panoply of what we can and cannot do to a human being. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. You're in jeopardy. You better pay attention to what's going on. Pay attention to what the politicians are saying. Pay attention to what's going on in our schools. Pay attention to what the medical community is telling us. And if you think that abortion is not a big deal, it is a big deal because it's not just the abortion of a baby. It might be the abortion of all of us. Sorry to say it, folks, but that's how it is.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of A Conversation with Father Orsi. Please be here again next week, same time, same place. Until then, have a great week and God bless.